on the socials. If you want, tag me if you want. I'll reshare that stuff. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever you want. Please connect with me. I love hearing feedback from you all. I know the folks that organize the conference at Render want to hear your feedback as well, so please do feel free to share as much as you can, as much as you want. Excuse me. I am the founder, my name is Dan Mall, to make sure that you all are in the right workshop. I'm the founder of an initiative called Design System University, where you can find curriculum, content, community to support how you design at scale. So if you're interested in design systems, maybe you're not sure, maybe after today, if you are interested or more interested in design systems, please do follow along. If you want a regular, structured way. Hey, what's up? Public service announcement, Justin. Cool. All right, Justin said this workshop is canceled. Thanks, everybody. No, I'm just kidding. Not canceled. Awesome. So doors open June 5th, which is this coming Monday. If you're interested, please do follow along. You can follow all of those in all those places: Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and I had stickers printed up, so you all have some stickers on your desk. You're welcome to use those. You're welcome to leave those. If you want one and you don't have one, let me know. I got some more up here, so find me in one of the breaks. Happy to hand those out to you. We got a bunch of good things coming up at Design System University. We have a thing called Study Hall that happens every month. It's basically a place where you can learn about design systems with your peers. We also have a bunch of guest speakers. You can find all that stuff on the website. I'm going to skip through this. Okay, so the important thing to know is that because you're in this workshop that you're taking is called Design System, Make Design Systems People Want to Use. This is a Design System University workshop and course. So at the end of today's workshop, I will share a code for everybody here who wants it, and you can have access to the online version of this workshop so that you can always go back and watch it. That's for free for you all. I'll share that at the end of this workshop. So I mention that because if you don't want to take copious notes, you don't have to. If you would like to, that's totally fine. If you would rather just like chill and be present and be as interactive as you can, and then you can go back and watch stuff later, you're welcome to do that too. So I just wanted to give you a couple options there. I would rather you be present and try to interact and just try to absorb as much as you can with your peers, with me, with the content, than trying to be capturing everything. This is a really full workshop, so we're going to take it as light as possible, but the information that I'm going to share, there's going to be a lot. So the feedback that I get from this workshop a lot is there's a lot of content, a lot to absorb, so please don't feel like you have to absorb it all in one go. There's a lot. Also, because you're taking a DSU course today, you're also eligible for the certificate that we give out too. So if anybody wants that, I will share how you get that at the end of this course too. You know, these are things that sometimes help you get recognition and promotion at work. They are super impressive to show to a date. You know, they help you get into clubs and sporting events. You know, so it's a really helpful thing. If you want digital copies of that, I'll share that at the end of today's workshop. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. This is what we're going to be going through. From 10 to 11, from 10 to 11, this workshop is a series of lectures. So from 10 to 11, I'll do the first lecture, which is called True Design Systems. And then we're going to take a break from 11 to 11:30. So we're going to be taking a lot of breaks in between the lectures, and you'll get 30-minute breaks. So that way you have time to use the restroom or check email or have phone calls or whatever you need to do. So it's going to be intense lecture and then big break, intense lecture, big break. That's the structure of today. Then after that 30-minute break from 11:30 to 12:30, we're going to do the second lecture, which is called Piloting Design Systems. This is one of the two most important things that I like to teach when teaching design systems is piloting. I'll tell you what that means at 11:30. And then after that, we will have our lunch break. So the lunch break will happen from 12:30 to 1:30. I think everyone is on their own for lunch, so you're welcome to wander around. Is there anybody in here from Atlanta or who knows Atlanta? So if you need recommendations, maybe those people can give you recommendations. If not, I don't know, just wander around and see if you can find some food. So we'll have about an hour break for lunch. And then after that, at 1:30, I would love for you all to be back at 1:30 so that we could do a group photo. So I'd love to do a group photo of the people that are in this course and in this workshop so that we could all celebrate doing design system stuff together. So hopefully that'll take 5 minutes. Maybe we'll just do that in here. At 1:35, from 1:35 to 2:30 is the third lecture, which will be design system workflow. That's the second most important thing that I like to teach when I teach design systems is once you have a design system or are working with a design system, you got to work differently. So what does that look like? What does that look like with designers and engineers and product people and product managers and things like that? I'll kind of show you what that would look like. And then, of course, we're going to take a break for 30 minutes after that. So that'll be 2:30 to 3. And then from 3 to 4 is the final lecture where we'll talk about design system metrics, how to measure whether your design system is successful, and we'll go pretty deep into that past the surface level adoption things. Some of you might know what I'm talking about, some of you might not. That's okay, we'll get there. And that'll be the last lecture for today from 3 to 4. So I mentioned that this workshop is 10 to 5. At 4 o'clock, we're going to stop. At the end of this workshop, we are going to have an hour of open time. So for those of you that want to hang around and just talk shop and talk design systems, we'll have just some open time to do that for the last hour. I'll stay until the last person leaves or until they kick us out, which is at 5. So you're welcome to hang out if you want. You're welcome to leave at 4 after the last lecture. So that's up to you whether you want to have that. It's a long day. You might get sick of me by that time, so you can make that a game time decision. Any questions or comments or jokes before we get started? Anybody have any jokes? Nobody has jokes. Yeah, you got a joke? What do you got?
Why do retired mathematicians often end up working as grave diggers?
Why do retired mathematicians often end up working as grave diggers? Anybody have an answer?
Luck is symmetry.
That's a good start to the day. More of that, folks, more of that. I'm a dad, I got 2 kids. More of that. All right, good work, thank you. Thank you, sir. Excellent.
Hashtag.
Hashtag digest. All right, cool. Well, let's get into the first topic for today. A quick poll here. We'll do like a raise hand, like, are you a designer or are you an engineer? So I'm gonna give you three options. I'd like to know in this room if you're an engineer, that'll be the first choice. If you're a designer, or if you're something else other than those things, you can raise your hand for 1 or 2 or all 3. It's up to you. But just to get a lay of the land here, how many people here identify as an engineer? Okay, good chunk. Cool. How about designer? How many people here identify as designer? Okay, about the same. How about other? Not one of those things. Okay, a few too. All right, so we have a good mix here. So we'll talk from all 3 of those perspectives. We'll talk about a lot of engineering stuff. We're going to look at code. We'll talk about a lot of design stuff. We're going to talk about that, and we'll also look at just general product stuff and kind of the ecosystem around design systems. What we're not going to do is like break open Sketch or Figma or Storybook and write some code. This is not a technical workshop both on design or engineering, so we're not going to do that stuff today. I'm going to talk to you about how to make design systems succeed overall, not from a technical basis, but from sort of a personnel perspective. Sound good? Okay, last thing is we have someone working on the AC. It's going to be pretty tight in here. So again, back to if you don't want to take notes, if you want to shut your computers, if you want to not have your computers running, you're welcome to do that. If you would rather have your computers running, you can do that as well. Just wanted to give you the option for all of that. The less computers we have running in here, the cooler it'll be in here, although someone will come in and make sure the temperature is good. Also, if you don't want to have your computers running, you're welcome to spread out around the room. If you don't want to sit like in tight little classroom style, if you want to move your chairs to the edges and make some space or reconfigure, you're welcome to do that too. I want you all to have a comfortable, relaxing, full day workshop with me about design systems. All right, so here we go. A couple months ago, I asked on Twitter, if someone said to you, show me your design system, what's the first thing that you would pull up? Now, half of the people who responded said, well, what I would pull up is my pants. Thank you, Twitter. But after that, though, these are all the different kinds of responses that came in. Right? So if you said, show me your design system, people thought, oh, I'd show Storybook, or I'd show some mood boards, I'd show emails, I'd show Slack messages, I'd show component libraries, I'd show our logo, I'd show our sketch file, all of these things. So what does this list signal? What does this actually mean for design systems? Does this say that despite all of the amazing articles and blog posts and videos and talks about design systems that we are still unsure about what they are? Does everybody have a good definition of design systems?
I don't have a definition, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So I see component library there, but why would that not be a part of a design system?
Good question. Yeah, I agree, and we'll talk about that too. Yeah. By the way, you all are welcome to ask questions whenever you want. We will have some time for Q&A at the end, but please do raise your hand, and also please don't feel like I'm the only one who has to answer questions. If you all have answers to each other's questions, please do contribute that as well. Thank you for that. I'll tell you one of my favorite resources for design systems is a book by Alla Tolmatova called Design Systems. It's published by Smashing Magazine. And I love this definition that Alla says in the book. She says, a design system is a set of connected patterns and shared practices coherently organized to serve the purposes of a digital product. And it's pretty good, it's pretty comprehensive. Now, there's a lot of decomposing those words to understand what they mean. That's a pretty good start, I think. That's at least one of the best that I found in my work. Now, unfortunately, not everyone follows this guidance. When a lot of people think about design systems, they think about something like this, right? This is one example of that. This is something in Figma or something in Sketch or Photoshop or Illustrator or some design tool that just displays all of the individual pieces. I call this a UI kit. Now, UI kits can be a design system unto their own. They can be part of a design system. Just like the great comment there about Storybook. Storybook can be, a component library can be an entire design system. It also can be part of a design system. So it's tough. The best metaphor that I have for it is like, if you had a big rock, you would call that a rock, right? And if you shattered that rock into a bunch of smaller pieces, what would the smaller pieces be called? Rocks, right? So all the little things are rocks, but if you put them together, they also make a rock. It's kind of how design systems work too. Like the whole thing is a design system, but when you take it apart, the little parts, the little pieces can be design systems on their own. So this is a UI kit. It can be a design system. It also can be part of a design system or one piece of it. And I think on its own, that's okay. But I think there's a dangerous trend that I see happening in design systems, especially the last few years, as we've sort of seen a renaissance in design tools like Figma and Sketch and plugins and things like that. And I think the danger is to move all of the work into Figma. So let me give you an example of what I mean. This is Dylan Field. He is the CEO of Figma, and this is a piece of a talk that he gave in 2020 at the Figma Config conference. So we're going to listen to this. I don't think that the audio is patched through the room actually. So listen carefully. If you all can't hear it, I'll describe it afterwards. So let's see if we can all hear it.
We have these various components, and we want to think about the different states of them. You might imagine that it's really important to be able to go prototype different states for those components. For example, let's say you have one button. You want to be able to, in that button, hook it up to a press state or a hover state, and without having to do that everywhere. And so one example of this might be a settings application, or settings part of the application in Spotify. Here I've got all these different toggle switches. And for those switches, I want to go into the prototype mode. And if I was going to try and prototype this in Figma today, I'd have to make this sort of monstrosity. Because I have to think about all the different possible combinations, which I think is like 2 to the 6 or something. We actually started prototyping out just to see if we could get it to work, and we stopped halfway through because we're like, there's better things to do with our time.
That's right. There are better things to do with our time. How did that sound in the back? Can you all hear that? It's okay? All right. So just to repeat it, make sure everybody gets the idea. Dylan's talking about prototyping one of the settings screens of the Spotify app at the time, and he said to prototype all the different interactions. This switch on, this switch off, this thing enabled, this thing disabled. He said there's about 2 to the 6th permutations of things that you have to wire up, and to me, that's part of the danger of design systems that exist just in Figma or even just in code, although I prefer the latter over the former, is that a lot of designers spend a lot of time here in Figma, right? And they'll spend days, hours, days, weeks wiring this thing up, 2 to the 6th interactions, and they'll feel really proud about that work. We will feel really proud about that work. We go, we did it. But it's not a product. No one can actually use this. This is just something that simulates a product. It still has to get rebuilt into something that users can actually interact with. So the danger is not Figma. The danger is actually moving all of the work into a Figma environment as opposed to another environment. And we'll talk a little bit later today about what that environment could look like, what the alternative could look like. It feels a little bit like this to me. I'm going to show you a video here, and a warning, there's a little bit of foul language in the next video, so if you're sensitive, you might want to earmuffs, or I don't think there's any kids in this room. Hopefully no kids are taking my workshop to skip school to take this design system workshop. Okay, so next video here. Here we go. So it kind of feels like that, like all this process to do something that's just really simple, right? Sometimes it feels like, to me, like wiring all that stuff up in Figma or in Sketch or whatever, sometimes you can just solve it with a line or two of CSS, right? But you spend hours and hours in Figma or in a design tool, and vice versa. Sometimes, an engineer will spend a ton of time figuring something out in code where it would have taken 15 minutes to sketch it out in Figma or Photoshop or wherever else. So a lot of times I think we put the work in the wrong place. Right? We have to figure out how to allocate that, and that's one of the great promises of design systems, is figuring out how we can allocate some of that work in a better spot, in a way that it's more effective, less expensive, things like that. One more example that I'll show you here that's related to that. We'll play another video, last video for now. This gentleman's name is Anders Flanders. Super impressive. I mean, it's like, he's a full band. But I mean, look at my man here. Like, does he look like he is having fun or enjoying himself? Like, I don't think so. Does this look like the face of somebody who's like, having a blast? Maybe. But I think the larger point that I'm trying to make is that he's trying to replicate something. And what is it that he's trying to replicate? I think he's trying to replicate the sound that comes from groups playing together, doing well. Bands like the Beatles that have percussion and drums and guitar and vocals and bass. Bands like Bob Marley and the Wailers. Bands like the Foo Fighters. Bands like the Miles Davis Quintet. Like all these people who are really good at a thing, and the sum of their music is greater than their individual contribution. The beauty of the sounds that come from groups, when they play together, when they do their thing together, when they see their individual skills as pieces of a whole and not independent, that's what he's trying to do on his own, right? And it's like, I mean, you can do it, it's possible, but you're gonna get tired, you're gonna exhaust yourself. Where sometimes the easier way is just to combine forces with people who do other things that are complementary to you. So let's bring this back to tech. I apologize for the long quote on the screen, but I'll read it out here. This comes from Alex Schleifer, who was the former VP of Design at Airbnb. And he says, 3 elements define a product: the business, the code, and the pixels. Give each a voice in all product decisions. Fuse engineering, product, and design from the start. The team should resemble a 3-legged stool in which each leg represents one of the 3 areas that helps build a product. If it's done from the start, like you see in figure A over here, each function can grow in parallel and proper ratio, like you see in figure B, as the broader organization scales. Without those strategies from the onset, though, you're bound to create an unstable stool down the line, which in this case is a shaky product. That might be because no design role was developed at the onset, like you see in Figure C, or was added on after the product and engineering product management teams have already matured and grown, like you see in Product D. The best way to avoid a wobbly seat or product is to build each stool with 3 legs from the get-go. Right? It's hard to do a one-person band. It's also hard to have a stable seat from the get-go, but that's really important when it comes to building products in the worlds that we live in. So let's talk about how we do that in relation to design systems. So similar to, to the conversation that we had before, sometimes design systems are just in design. Sometimes they're just in code. Sometimes they're just in product. Sometimes they're just in these places. And while that's sometimes just the reality, it creates wobbly stools. So how do we create a design system that is not a wobbly stool? What are all the pieces that will go in a design system? Well, we already mentioned one, right? This is a UI kit. The other obvious part of that is a library of all the components in code, which is usually called a component library, which is kind of the code counterpart to what we would normally find in a UI kit. Now, already here there are problems. Anybody know what the problems are? Anybody have any guesses or experiences about that? Yeah, go ahead.
They diverge.
They diverge, exactly, right? Because designers make one thing and engineers make the other thing, and then, how do we keep them together? That's one of the most common questions I get in my workshops and in my teaching is, what secrets do you have to reconcile what we have in our design library and our code library? And the answer is none. None secrets. That's the answer. I'll share later today after lunch when we talk about workflow, the best way to keep those in sync. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it is not a tool. It's a process, right? The process is the workflow is the thing that keeps it in sync, not an actual tool. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But already here there are problems. So sometimes what we do to solve those problems is we go, okay, let's at least have a shared set of guidelines. The guidelines that we can use that apply to both design and code. And a lot of times we put those guidelines in an external website. I like to call that a reference site. Right? So a lot of you who are familiar with design systems, you've seen these reference sites before. CarbonDesignSystem.com is IBM's design system, and that's where you find the guidance for how to use it. LightningDesignSystem.com is Salesforce's design system, and that's where you find the guidance of how to use that design system. So a lot of times these will exist in an external website, sometimes called a style guide site. I like to call it a reference site. And all of these things feed into it, right? You can find documentation about component libraries, you can find documentation about the guidelines, and eventually all of that stuff goes together to make a digital product, right? And by digital product, I mean something that goes to a customer or a consumer that they can interact with. Something that helps them pay their water bill, something that helps them book a ticket, something that helps them do something, that's not related to just the design and the coding of that piece. So now that we have all of our pieces, we can kind of say this is generally, this stuff over here on the left, generally we can call that collection of stuff a design system. All right, and there's some other things that kind of feed into that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But essentially, our product on the right isn't, the digital product on the right, it's important because that's what specifies that our design system needs to be a piece of software in order to create a digital product. Okay, so a couple of other things now. The more products you have, the better your design system is. The more helpful your design system becomes because you're using one set of things to not just power one website or one app, but multiple websites, multiple apps, multiple kiosks, multiple touch points, multiple things that are digital from the same set of things. That's where the efficiency of design systems comes from. Okay, and then one last piece that I'll add to take it to the next level. This is not part of the traditional definition of design systems or table stakes for a design system, but if you keep your eye on the top right over here. Oh, check this out. I bought this fancy remote. Let's see if that works. Oh, there it is. Ooh. It's a waste of money. A lot of teams are playing around with the idea of things called design tokens. How many people here have heard of design tokens? Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later on today. We're not going to dive into that too much. But essentially, design tokens are a way to encapsulate design decisions. And those design decisions then can feed into the reference site and also feed into the component library. Design tokens are places where you can store things like, we have brand red, and we want to define brand red in one place, so that everything that uses brand red uses that same brand red. And then later on, in 2 years, when we hire Pentagram to change brand red to brand purple, we only have to change it in one place, and all those other things will accept those changes if we want them to. So design tokens for some teams become part of their design system, a fundamental piece of their design system. So here are all the things that are involved in design system. Now, I probably didn't really tell you anything that you don't know or maybe haven't really put together yourself. Even if the visualization might be new to you, that might be helpful. Yet so many teams struggle with design systems. They know this stuff, right? So, okay, if you know this stuff, then where's the hard part? Like, what's the difficult thing? Aren't the pieces here pretty straightforward? Well, part of it is how you think about these things and the role that they have. So this is one of the ways that I teach design systems is in thinking about all the pieces here is like this. UI kits and component libraries are tools that primarily help with process, right? So UI kits help designers to design faster and better. Component libraries and code help engineers to code faster and better. But design systems they're not just adding those two things together. There's something else altogether. Design systems help product teams deliver software to customers faster and better. So while UI kits and component libraries are tools that help with process, a design system is a tool that helps with delivery. Right? And thinking about them a little bit differently allows us to understand the role of them a little bit better. For those of you that are interested in systems thinking or design systems or systems design, this is an excellent book. If you haven't read this one, please do. I suggest this one very highly. It's by Donella Meadows, and it's called Thinking in Systems. And in this book, she kind of talks about what makes a system and what things are not a system. Right? So she says in the book, is there anything that's not a system? Yes, a conglomeration without any particular interconnections or function. Before going too far, it's a good idea to stop dissecting elements and start looking for the interconnections, the relationships that hold the elements together. What I love about this quote is that it explains where a lot of us go wrong with design systems. In the conversations about design systems, what do most people talk about? Components. It makes sense. We need to talk about those things, but we forget to talk about how the components relate to each other, how they are connected. That's a really important thing about design systems is instead of focusing on the elements, focus on how the elements work together. All right, and we'll talk about that a little bit later after our break when we talk about piloting. We're going to talk about how they fit together, not the components themselves. If you look at every reference site, let's go to this diagram again. If you look at every reference site, the reference sites are generally about components. Component APIs, component guidelines, how to use, do's and don'ts, all important stuff. I'm not saying don't do those things, but we spend too much time there. We over-index on that part and don't focus on how the other things go together. Yeah, is there a question in the back? Good question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, my hair is just...
Oh yeah, no worries, no worries. So this is why it's important that people like us, when we work with design systems, that we work with true connected design systems. Design needs to be connected to engineering and needs to be connected to product. All of the things need to be connected to each other. That's where design systems fail, usually, is when things aren't connected. Design's doing their own thing, engineering's doing their own thing, products trying to get them to play well together. It doesn't really work well that way. So if we focus on the connections between them, that gives us a better pathway. All right, everybody following so far? Good, cool. So we'll get a little bit into the technical connection of this. I'm going to show it to you. Some of you, you're going to be like, yeah, duh, makes sense. I know this. Some of you are going to be like, I had no idea that that's how it works. But this is kind of level setting to make sure we're all on the same page about it. So one of the common questions that I get is like, well, what's the difference between a component library and a design system? And to me, a component library is a collection of things. It is a collection where you can browse examples and find code snippets to implement into a code base. What makes it a design system is when you connect it to something. So an unconnected or a disconnected component library, or a disconnected design system is just a component library. It's just a bunch of stuff. As soon as you plug it into something or connect it to something else, it can turn into a design system. So I'll show you an example of what that looks like. How many people here have used Bootstrap before? Okay, so lots of people have a love-hate relationship with Bootstrap. Bootstrap, when it first came out, and for those of you that don't know Bootstrap is essentially the library that Twitter used to build Twitter. So it was all of their common stuff, buttons, card components, headers, footers, all of that kind of stuff. And then they open sourced it and then eventually grew it to be more than what Twitter is using. When Bootstrap first came out, you could only use it as a component library. You could not use it as a design system. Now, you actually have the choice. You can use it as a component library and you can use it as a design system. And I'll show you the difference between the two using Bootstrap as an example here. So to use Bootstrap as a component library, you can go to any page on the Bootstrap website, and this is Bootstrap's reference site. It's getbootstrap.com, and you'll see here across the, I'm gonna get my money's worth. Across the left here is a list of components, right? Like you see on most reference sites. So if we go to the card component detail page, it shows you, okay, about the card, a description, and then some examples. If we scroll down on this page, here's some examples. And most reference sites have something like this on them. They'll show you an example of a component, and then right below it is some code that you can use to actually use the component. So if we look here at this code is HTML code. So what I can do is I can copy this code, and I can open my own HTML page. Sorry if it's too small for people in the back. It's not important that you are able to read the code on the screen. Just know that this is a blank HTML page. There's nothing in the body tag, which means nothing is going to show up on the screen. And I can literally take that code from Bootstrap, copy it, and paste it into there. And once I save it and open this in a browser, it'll show up on my screen. Right? So this is what happens when you copy that snippet of code from Bootstrap's website, paste it into a code editor, and load it up. On the base level, it's pretty cool. Like, we just made a card component in like 1 second. It's pretty nice. So that's helpful to me. But that's kind of where the help stops. When you use a component library, the problem is it's not a system. And why is it not a system? Per the last quote that we just talked about, it's not connected to anything. I copied and pasted it into my code. The Bootstrap website doesn't know anything about my code. My code doesn't know anything about the Bootstrap website. They're completely disconnected, which could be fine until you want to change things. So let's say we looked at that card and we go, man, the contrast on the border between the card and the background is so light. I want to improve or increase the contrast so that people who have low vision can see it better. So we decide, let's put a really thick navy blue border on that. Right? So we make a change in our code and we put a navy blue border around that. The problem is that helpful change that we just made stays local to our code. There's no way that we could get that back into Bootstrap. We can't be like, hey, we made a great change for everybody. There's no way that we could contribute that back to Bootstrap other than maybe emailing the Bootstrap team and being like, hey, we have some contributions for you, and they would be like, who is this? And then right, like, and then it wouldn't work. So it's not connected to what we're doing. And also the same thing the other way, right? So Bootstrap, if you see, the theme of Bootstrap is purple, but the button is blue. So let's say one day Bootstrap did some research and they found purple buttons perform better than blue buttons. So if you keep your eye on the button down here, Bootstrap changes their button to purple. Well, we have a blue button in ours, and we're like, well, we want that blue button. We want that purple button, excuse me. So how do we get that purple button? We have to then, I guess we could copy and paste the code here, but then we lose our blue outline. We lose any other changes so we can't really merge those two things together. And the reason for that is because they're not connected. Things are happening over here and things are happening over there, and one doesn't know about the other. With component libraries, you can only copy a thing, paste it over into your thing, but there's no connections between the two. You can take it from one place and move it to another place. That's it. So that's not to say that component libraries are not helpful, but that's the limit of their help, right? Because they're not systems. So if you change something in one place, the change is isolated to that place because there's no connection. So let's look at a design system. You can use Bootstrap in this way. I'm going to use a different one as an example. This is Material UI. So this is an old version of Google's design system called Material Design. This is a third-party library that's basically based on Google's design system. So this is only a design system. You cannot use Material UI as a component library, at least as far as I know. Somebody here might know something different. You cannot use it as a component library, which means you cannot copy and paste code that is not connected. You can only use it in a connected way. So let's look at what that looks like. And it's going to get a little bit technical here. For those of you who don't write code, just follow along with the concepts. For those of you that do write code, you're going to be like, yeah, duh. But I'm going to go through it to make sure we're all on the same page. So what we have here is, on the left, I have a command line open, a terminal open, and on the right, I have a folder structure. All right? And what I can do in the command line is I can write a command, and you'll see that happening here. And that command that I write will be npm install Material UI core. And it's going to spin for a minute. And what's happening in the background is, I'm going to do some, I have this thing. In this node modules folder, this command is installing a bunch of things in there. And as a mediocre developer at best, I'm like, I don't know, that seems like magic to me. Like, some magical things are happening in that folder. But there are things that I do know, and those are the important things. So we're going to look at this file here. I think I'm putting it the right thing. It's called package.json. It's a JSON file that basically tells this project what things to include. So if we open up that file, right, that file, is that file. If we open up that file, this is what that file looks like. We're going to focus on a specific part of this. We're going to look at lines 11 through 18. And those lines say dependencies. And you'll see that one of those dependencies, right here, no, that doesn't help. One of those dependencies right in the middle says Material UI Core. So when I typed npm install Material UI Core, it is linking that design system to this project. So now there's a connection between the two. That means anytime that Material UI library gets updated, I can get those updates for free if I want. It also means I can push the other way if I want to and if I have the access to do that. So this line in particular is the connection between my code and the design system. Everybody following? Make sense? Okay, go a little bit further. So what this means is our site, and because it's listed in that dependencies part, that means that our site or app or project or whatever we're building is dependent on that design system. We cannot use this, especially if we start to use components, we are dependent on that design system, right? And that's an important piece of this. So how might we use that? Before I showed you a blank HTML file, now I'm showing you a blank React file. So this is because this is a React design system. So what we can do is we can do a similar thing. We can go to the Material UI website. We can go to a card component page, just like we did with Bootstrap. We can scroll down on that page to see some card examples and code examples. But you see here, there's not that like HTML box anymore. I'm not copying and pasting HTML elements. I'm actually looking at the API here. So what I can do is I can copy the React code. I'm going to show you how different that looks when we get into our React app. A couple of things here. So let me point out a few things. Up at the top there, line 1 says import React from React, and there's nothing else below that. We're going to grow that part. We're going to add some more things to that part. That basically says, I want you to import a bunch of things to let me use those things. Right? So that's how design systems work, is we connect it to the design system, then we import a bunch of the components that are already in the design system, and then we can use them with just one line of code. We don't have to write all these lines of code. Then in between lines 6 and 9, that's where we're going to put the code that shows up on screen. So first thing we need is, let's import some of the components that we need. So at the top there, we've just imported those 5 lines. Import card actions, import card content, button, and typography. These are the 5 things from the design system that we need to use a card component. We need typography, we need a button, we need card content, we need card actions, we need card. Then below, all I need to do is add the card code. Now I know for those of you that don't know what this is, it looks similar to that HTML code, but it's sort of like pseudocode. Because I'm not actually writing all of the things that I need for the card, I'm just basically referencing it. I'm saying like, put a card here. And I'm able to use the properties of that card to manipulate how it looks like. But there's no actual card content here. So to simplify it even more, these lines of code are shorthand. Essentially, I could have just done this. And without writing any of the things that go inside this, I get to use the card. I'm oversimplifying a little bit. Some of you who are engineers in here, you're like, that's not exactly how it works. But follow me here on the concept of this. Essentially, just by using that card code, I get the default card here. Okay, so far, this is similar to what we did with Bootstrap, but just different syntax. So some of you might be like, I'm not sure that I get the difference, or I get the benefit of doing it this way. So the benefit is, if we go back to our package.json file, and remember we had that line 14, Material UI Core, right? So let's highlight that line, and it says, Material UI Core 5.0.0-alpha.12. That's a particular version of the design system that I have linked to my project. If Material UI decides, hey, we're gonna make our buttons purple instead of blue, now they have a version alpha.13. All I have to do is write one line of code in my terminal, which is this line of code. I say npm update. And what npm update will do is it will automatically change 5.0.0-alpha.12 to 5.0.0-alpha.13. And everything that's in 13 will now come automatically with this and merge automatically too into my project. So with this change, once I run npm update, I get purple buttons for free. And it doesn't change any of the code. That if I put a blue outline around things, it respects all of that stuff. It just updates the things that come with the system that don't break my code. And that's the value and the advantage of using a design system, is that it's connected. I can keep doing this for every version that gets released of this design system, and I get new things for free without breaking the things that I've already done. And that's because these two things are linked. So, just a quick review. With component libraries, I can only copy things and paste them from one place to another. But with design systems, all of these arrows here are connection points. All right, and you see here there's a small link icon that I've added here, right, to say all of these things are linked to this site. And where the beauty of design systems actually comes in is when it's linked to multiple sites and multiple apps. Because now, if we change blue button to purple button over here in our component library, then for each of these sites and apps over here, if we npm update any of those things, we get purple button for free. One line of code, one change. We're going to stop here for some questions, but I'll share one last story before we do, and before we go into our break. I once worked with an organization that did a rebrand. And it was a big organization. Their rebrand was essentially they have yellow buttons, and they changed their buttons to purple. Right, so that was the rebrand. Anybody want to guess how long they estimated for that project? They didn't have a design system at that company. Anybody want to estimate how long that project was and how much money it cost? Just take a guess. 300 hours? I mean, that's pretty generous. Like, we're talking months, though. How many months? Just a good guess. 8 months?
Well,
It was 11 months. How much money? 16 million. To change yellow buttons to purple. Because they have a lot of apps and a lot of sites, and they have to go into each one of those that their customers are using. All of them are in production, and they have to go into each one of those to change those manually, because there's no system where I can change the one instance of purple button, of yellow button to purple button, and then npm update or the equivalent on any of those things. So it was a manual process. Let's go into each one, and you know, some of those code bases are like, oh yeah, we worked on that last quarter. Some of those code bases are like, we worked on that like 5 years ago. Like no one works at this company anymore who worked on that thing. So like, just getting familiar with, just to find where the button even is on the iOS app or the Android app, like that becomes a significant challenge, where it should be, what should it be in 2 weeks? Instead of what did I say, 11 months and $16 million, it should be about 2 weeks, maybe less than that, a week to do that work, and then maybe 3 or 4 weeks of QA, just to make sure you didn't break anything. Not $16 million. So this is where design systems really help us, because I'm showing a very simplified version of this, where we've got 4 apps or sites. But companies and enterprises that use design systems, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of applications, very complex ones that are used a lot at scale. So when you do these changes at scale, it really adds up. And this is where design systems can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, but they have to be done well. And they have to be done in a way that is connected. So if there's anything that you take from this workshop today, if you leave now, I hope what you take is that whatever we do has to be connected. Right? And I'll tell you later on, I'm trying to tease you to stay for this the rest of the day. I'll tell you later on how to connect those things in a smart way. But at the very least, when you have things connected, you're able to make changes really well and really easily. And where design systems come into play best is at the times of change. So, we'll stop there. I think we'll stop there? Yeah, we'll stop there. We'll take a break. It's 10:48 now. We'll take a break at 11. So we've got 12 minutes. If there's any questions or comments or anything like that, and I have a prompt for you to kind of think about over your break. But for now, any questions or comments or anything? Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about, like, you don't have to like decouple like Material UI, for example, from like your code base because you can benefit from these updates. How often do you see that happening though, where a company wants to receive like third-party updates on their design versus having like a completely separate branch of the design system? I guess the one benefit would be like getting new components, but would a company really, they have a brand style
great question, and thank you for opening that that book. So there's sort of two questions that I want to separate in that. One is, do companies really want this process? And then the second one is, do companies want this process by using like a material design or a lightning design or some other third-party thing? So the first one is, companies want this process a lot when having their own custom design system, because the risk is lower. The risk is lower that like, okay, so we got this card component, but it has nothing to do with like our brand, our colors, our typefaces, our functionality, our content, like none of that stuff. Material design can't do that for us because they're not our company. They do it for Google. With companies that build their own design system, that's really helpful. So if you're building a custom design system, that's really good, is to go like, so one team, and I'll describe this in the next lecture that we have, when you pilot design systems, when you create components with specific teams, with specific use cases, and you know that those components can then benefit the rest of the company, that becomes really helpful. I've seen teams pilot, for example, an autocomplete component that would have taken 12 weeks for an individual team to build, just to see that another team has built something very similar. Whereas if one team tackles that, now they save weeks and weeks because they know that their autocomplete works for the rest of their company. So in that case, this connected system is incredibly useful. In the other case, it's helpful for startups. So when people ask me like, why shouldn't we just use material design? Like, why should we build our own here? The general answer that I give is, if you know that you're going to redesign your design system or do something different in 2 to 3 years, then yeah, use something off the shelf. If you want your design system to last longer than 3 years, build it from scratch. Because around the 2 to 3 year mark is where I see a lot of organizations who are like, they start to fight the design system. They start to, yeah, we're using material, but we're actually taking more out of it than we're actually using it. And so at that point, 2 to 3 years in, their needs are complex enough that they're not actually benefiting from some third party off the shelf thing. So in those first 2 years though, that's when people are like, yeah, I'll take their card component because I don't have to build one on my own. And they're not quite, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not upset enough about it in that time frame. They're like, hey, we're doing, we made something, we shipped something. Around the 2 to 3 year mark, it's like, yeah, we shipped something, but it's not even close to what we actually thought we wanted to do. So that's the general answer I give about that, and that's where I think it's helpful. If you're building a custom system, a connected system is really worth it. It's a big investment to do. That's the downside. If you need a design system off the shelf, or if you need a design system for less than 2 to 3 years, using a material most people can live with. Yeah, good.
Actually, I'll add on to that. The one other benefit is we are literally having this discussion right now in our company. A lot of the pre-built systems have really good accessibility, really good, a lot of work was put into those systems that would take a lot of time to replicate. So for us, for instance, most of our components, they're simple enough and we have our own small ones, but we just built a modal using materials that, like the actual component, but our own styles on top of it. So kind of taking some things from others when it's really complicated and we have no time to do it, but for the most part using our own internal stuff.
Yeah.
I think it was just two things. I guess the first thing is what you were describing with that whole we're going to grow out of this for MUI. That's literally exactly what you described is exactly what happened in my company, where they started off with 4 and then someone added version 5 because it had stuff that version 4 didn't, but they still need to keep version 4, and now people are just constantly having to fight with the system, and it's like, this used to be faster, but now it's actually slower, and now it's more of a problem. And they were, and that's why they're having, me build this thing. And then like he was saying, there's actually ways I found that you can use say TanStack or things like that, or headless UI kind of, or React Aria, those types of things to basically have those hard things taken care of for you. So you're not having to come up with these complex abstractions over here, but you're still able to build it with your own markup and your own styles. And that's I think the ultimate sweet spot I found.
Yeah, I love that. I think so. I've been doing this workshop for about 3 years, about 4 years now. When I first started giving this workshop, there were no options like that available, right? It was like, okay, if you're going to use a material, you're going to use everything that comes with it, good, bad, and ugly. Now, what I love about the tooling in our space is that there are a lot of things coming out that's here's just an accessibility boilerplate. And you're like, great, this is awesome. Or here's a skeleton, React component boilerplate that you can use. Like, that's awesome. So there's a lot of, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of new tooling that has helped do that, both on the code side as well as the design side. So there are a lot of Figma libraries now that you can use that's like just vanilla. You apply your own styling or your own theming to it, but they get you set up with things that are connected in Figma, so using symbols, using components, nested symbols, variables, variants, things like that. I'm encouraged about the tooling in this space. It's still a little bit early, right? But I can only imagine in the next couple of years, we'll just see a lot more of those so that we have more options where it's like, I just want half of that, I don't want this other half, and that's a legitimate request that we can actually make and work with. Yeah, great comments. What else? Yeah.
Yeah, so I imagine most folks here don't have the luxury of having, the ability to build out your design system how you want it and then deploy it, right? You have consumers and they're having different versions and you have to manage all that. So if you're building in flight, say you have a component library, consumers are using, version 1, 2, 3, and then you want to actually evolve into having the design component element, would that rollout structure be more fortuitous to couple that with the component library to begin with, or have that separate? Because I have developers who are like, yeah, I'm not going to go and test out your this as a guinea pig, right? Like, so what does that sort of evolution structure look like as you're trying to build one of these into a robust system?
So I'll give the short answer now, and then that's what the rest of the day is about too, is talking about what that rollout structure looks like. So the short answer is Bird by Bird. Everybody read Bird by Bird? Everybody know that book? It's a book by Anne Lamott. It's about writing, and the story in the introduction goes, the author and her brother, at one point when he was in elementary school, he had to write a report about birds, and he had a whole semester to write it, and he didn't write any of it, of course. So the last day before it's due, he's sitting in the kitchen with his head in his hands, crying, and his dad comes up to him and he goes, Dad, what's wrong? So I have this report to do about birds and I have to write it on 60 birds and I haven't done any of it. How do I do this? And his dad goes, bird by bird, son. All right, so and that's how you do it. Like, it's a simple answer, but how do you release a design system component by component? I think it's an oversimplified answer, but I think a lot of people overlook it. A lot of people think, well, our first version has to be material design. Like, you know how long the material design team has been working on material design? They're going on 12 years now, I think. Everybody thinks that they have to release 60 components out of the gate. And I'm like, how about one? And people think that that's an incredulous answer. I think I'm being like facetious, but how about just one component? If you release one component, autocomplete, and that saves some teams 2 weeks, that's a really good design system. But we don't allow ourselves to do that. No, it's gotta be 60 components, and it's gotta have taken 2 years for us to build. Well, not all of us, most of us don't have the luxury to do that at our company. So how do we do it? Bird by bird. How do we get leadership to allow us to do it? Bird by bird. So that's what we'll talk about, later today. Is like, we have to pitch that well, we have to tell that story well, we have to sometimes not pitch and just do work. So I'll talk about that a little bit later today, of like how we build traction there that gets people interested in that. But essentially that's the process. It's like one component at a time. Build confidence one component at a time with the teams that are working. Yeah, great questions. Anyone else? You guys have one? No? Yeah.
We're building, so we're working at Cisco, there's a big design system rollout happening. Not that big, announced at the show.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But we have a lot of companies consuming design systems that are trying to figure out how to handle snowflakes. Something that is different when you do it on a project level versus a company level. And I'm just curious.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I've cut those slides out today just for time, but in a break or over lunch or something, if anybody wants to talk about that, essentially that's a system of systems architecture between common systems that sit centrally and also some local systems where some snowflakes can work. So if anybody's interested in that, we can whiteboard and diagram some of that stuff out. I can see if I can pull up the slides, but like that's its own section. I don't know if we have time for that officially today, but happy to talk about it. Yeah. Anyone else? Where did the general keep his armies? in his sleeveys. All right, enjoy your break. See you at 11:30. Bye, everybody. Yeah, I'll take a 30-minute break. It's 10:59 now, so stretch, hang out, walk outside if you want to, and let's be back at 11:30. We'll start the next section.
Salty about it because I have the last one on my job. Everybody else knows.
So we don't have the same charge board.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sure somebody.
I've known a couple. I went to college.
I got your pictures.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can use them, but not saying Neither. I started to like the race, and I see a lot of notes on that. Yeah, yeah, sorry. Test. From manual testing. Yeah, that's kind of how I transition. Oh, I like writing code. I like making this easier. I like making it faster. So many games you can make. I think what I like about software engineering is like there's these tokens.
Yeah, that's a big thing I'm trying to
Somebody else
give
is
to the
doing
designers. Like a file, press like
something and I add
something in there. I'm just trying to do something clever initially to have like custom
Can I point to
code and pick up. There's no good tool for that. It's all terrible. Doing it by hand and did it in 2 hours. It's like you say. Sometimes there's always tools to like you so clever with the stuff. It's wasting time. I don't have to go over like where you are.
It's a good. I felt it was a good way to get it.
You know, like, sure, what is something different? Great.
Yeah, on my
So you speak, you have to know what this is. This is a change of pace. Everybody's always like, yeah, but this stuff. I feel like this is like, wow. Our sides have no opinion, so I had to do that everywhere around. Very good. Just like you know that a lot of really good minds. So it's product manager, engineer, they have more than he's kind of new. That's right. All the trying code was written by a lot of back-end designers.
Yeah, that is
All kinds of things. And nobody's really like, it's very exciting. Exactly. He was watching my job. It's like exactly what happened. I was building a core library. My manager told me at no point I had to use anything. So like the CTO asked me,
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
What is it? Can you do it? So I do it. Exploration is part of it. Most things that originally made decisions about that, they were all like, so some people their own thing. We're so fighting so much. Versions of it in the same breath.
Yeah, I mean, we need to. Yeah, right now we're trying to like evolve.
now when I became project and learn.
I actually really like Flash, depending on the way it is.
No, I'm serious. It's totally a shit deal. Plus, it's already got CSS very support like built in. Using those React components. That example you showing for React components, right? It's basically on my looks like just not
Yeah, yeah, I suppose it's not. It is mostly limited to a certain extent, but there is like a big one where you're like,
this thing up there is like component H2 is very HI, so I want H2.
most of the references where you know what
Yeah, I didn't know
I don't know, like
There's a lot of I'm going to use a class to do that for 2 seconds.
a little bit of a ramp up period, but it's slow also the tricks. Google is right there and it knows what it is. How to ask and colors and
But it also like makes sense.
Well, so I was a part of the feature that makes it
Okay.
It's not designed for me.
we are using
So I don't know. That's what agency work that I fall into the trap all the time. Like I have to make it super extensive. That's how it's always like nobody's
also, yeah, like our city, I mean, it was like that, like how many different design systems we have. Like, it's just like brand on it.
Yeah, so there's a line
Might be throwing yourself out, putting yourself out of your
I'm really just, I want to, and you go sit there, but it's like, time for that, it's never done. Somebody, not right out.
Yeah, tell me about it. I haven't.
Oh, for me, it's okay. Right on, yeah, me too.
Okay, like it doesn't live up or it doesn't stay at home.
I guess it could be not university.
Where you work? I don't know if I'm at the like, because I don't love, I like being able to walk places. Yeah, and I do miss that. So my family lives in down. You like that? You like that? Yeah. Yeah, I was like, and to be fair, like everything is accessible. There's just like suburbs that I can't live in the city and vice versa, but like the convenience and way more.
So, how long have you been? Oh, yeah.
Probably about like, I can see myself just from like practicality, like buying property, like urbanization.
But, that moment,
But I don't know. Process. Probably.
I just kept on going.
Part of it was like Chicago for I mean this is home. I want to have an experience. I want to experience other cities, other places. So right now I'm in the city. Might be like one other place. And I also I'm not getting like great options right now.
I wouldn't tell somebody. That's not.
Really? Okay.
But I'm just there. Some people love this fast lifestyle. Yeah, it's right. Like going to the deli at 1 a.m. is cool. But then dealing with somebody who's training.
It's funny you mentioned like stuff at home. I don't even know that I would take that much advantage of that. Like how often would I read scrolling? Not like I would use it. Okay.
Oh, well, I don't know what type of person. What do you?
That's a very open question. You mean like going out at night?
Yeah, because some people like nightlife. Yeah. I mean,
It is possible, and I like that about it. I like that you can just go out and out. I've never lived that. I've only had that here, weekend visit.
But it's like my friends, they're not even chatting off. Well, it's like a culture shock.
I haven't spent a lot of time outside. Chicago is like the city, outside the city, state.
What was Chicago?
They have
I
like,
always wanted to go.
so you are a designer, and then after you get that design job, you learn to how to use your business backside. Chicago is great. I love Chicago. That's why I live there. The only downside I think about Chicago is that if you're not a nature person, summer makes up for it. Summer is peaceful down by the lake. Like surprisingly good. Midwest, it's very culturally like arts, concerts, museums, 10 out of 10 across the board. Sports, it's a little tough right now. It's a little hard out here, but we're still proud. We're still proud.
Are you Bulls?
I am.
Good for the traffic.
Yeah, I just. Yeah,
I'm Brian.
you ever, I mean, I'm rooting for that. I'm rooting for
Actually,
We're rooting for Jimmy right now. For the next 3 years. Absolutely not. I know they had Zeros, they had Citadel.
came back and twice. Then I'll
They
go
had
pick her up and then head back from the city between
I watched a lot of Knicks games.
She lets me ride the edge of her lane.
Yeah, I mean, many of my dreams. I used to go to
Ben Gordon, very famous. I don't know.
well, the Knicks were bad.
It is. It's down by the airport, but they got 8 acres. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean, I have to say, when they're good, I still watch it. They made a play in Miami, actually.
Okay, yeah, I used to go down to Baker Hill. You know, I left San Diego a long time ago to Colorado City, San Francisco, and now I'm here, so it's been a long time. I really like it.
Can't wait to see what it's That's fair. Yeah. Oh, when I think the thing that can be tough about it is sometimes it's too cool. So it's like, what are yeah, when the low is starting to mountain snow? Not very rarely, probably like 3 or 4 days. You have a lot of stuff.
I was lucky. My mom, she let me.
What school was that?
You referenced documentation the other day.
I'm so happy.
Oh, yeah.
The kids, they got a bad
Now the generations, I don't know.
But now you know, like, how to prepare.
Oh, yeah. Not when you check my focus. I was like,
Well, like, in our restaurants end up going for like
Yeah, I don't know how to
production line, like into
how you communicate, how you socialize. Yeah, like with friends, what if I do I might be a different person. Wherever you were headed, it's different. Yes, and this is that.
we have a wide range.
There's an opportunity set of I think
monitor. It should. I think we have some that are specifically yeah, that's probably it should take we take our we have some just here, I guess cards. We used to
Emmanuel? Malik.
Nice to meet you.
Have you been here all day? Since the start?
Literally everybody in the back probably arrived here like last minute and we missed everything.
Oh wow.
I'm sitting here, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Trying to take
I'm just arriving myself. They told me it was full, but yeah, I gotta take it. I've been to the workshop.
I didn't. We're allowed to do multiple workshops.
I believe so. Yeah, as long as there's space, right? I think they have like capacity limitations. So that's so much.
I have no idea. I registered this for the workshop all day. And I was like, alright, I'm designing this one for but everything else I had no idea.
Yeah. Are you a designer?
Yeah, I'm trying to get further into like product and UX design.
Do you do like primarily web design right now? Or graphic design?
I would say a mixture of graphics and web design. But like my main job is not even related to tech.
Oh wow.
I'm trying to get transition.
Yeah, I do design as well. Yeah, I have a design and development agency. So I've seen a lot of his content online. It's really good. Dan, the speaker. So yeah, I'm super pumped to see.
So you're talking about, you've seen this?
Yeah, he's a big deal. He's very popular in the design community. He talks a lot about design systems, being a freelancer, and that kind of stuff. So lots of good content on YouTube and stuff like that.
And you say you work at an agency?
I have an agency.
Oh, you have your own agency?
Yeah. I used to work at like other tech companies. And then started my agency after a couple years.
How was that?
Great.
Decided, you know what?
I mean, no, I've been freelancing for years. I've always been like a founder, entrepreneur-minded person. So I've always like worked on my own projects. I've teamed up with friends. We've launched things. I've gotten some traction. So it was like a natural transition because I just found myself hacking on things like all the time. And so just slowly started building more infrastructure and process and rigor around it, which is how I got here. So,
So what brings you out to, are you from Atlanta?
I live here now. Yeah, but I moved here from Essex. Where do you live right now? Ah, New York. Okay, what part of New York? Oh, nice. I did an internship and lived in Harlem.
Oh, really?
Like 125th and St. Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Right in the middle, you know.
That's an interesting area.
Yeah.
It's like in comparison to what it was back in the day to now, to gentrification, it's a crazy switch.
I haven't been back in like 5+ years, but yeah, it's crazy.
So how you like Atlanta?
I love Atlanta, man. It's a change from SF for sure, but it's a good vibe, man.
Trying to get out of New York, man.
Do it, bro. I feel like a lot of people are doing the same thing. It's the exodus, you know?
Everybody's coming to New York.
Oh, really? I've been seeing a lot of people moving from New York for like smaller cities like Nashville, Atlanta, Miami.
Join that crew.
Yeah, bro. Make the move.
You can't do that anymore.
Alright, get started again. How about a little bit of feedback? Two options. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand.
Another important piece of business, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to be standing in front of this. Another important piece of business, what did the janitor say when he jumped out of the closet? Supplies! Okay, so one last piece of thing, of serious business. How many people, I introduced this like NPM install thing, dependencies, all that. How many of you already knew this? How many of you are like, yeah, I got it? How many of you are like, this is completely new to me, I've never heard of this stuff before? Okay, good split here. All right, excellent. Thank you for the feedback. It helps me to kind of figure out how to dial in how deep we go into a particular topic or not. So now we're gonna, in this session, this will be about an hour. I think we'll probably use the full hour before we break for lunch. We're gonna talk about my favorite way to work on design systems. This is this bird by bird thing that I've talked about. It's called piloting design systems. How do you make a design system in the context of a large company, a moving company? There's already products, we don't have a thing. So I'll share a couple of different ways that we will do, that you can do that. Inevitably, probably all of you have been in a meeting like this sometime where someone's like drawing on the whiteboard and making like, cards and tables and all this, and somebody says, hey, why are we designing cards and tables again? If only we had a library of things that we could reuse, which is a good thought, good inclination, right? So then the team goes, yeah, that'd be great. And then the team kind of brainstorms and like comes up with a bunch of things like this. Like, yeah, if we had like all the common stuff that we tend to use, alerts and buttons and grids and drawers and tabs and tags and all sorts of things like that. And so generally sometimes it's a lone designer or a lone engineer or maybe a small rogue group of 2 or 3 people that get started on a handful of common elements that they think could be applicable for everybody, right? Like a bunch of this stuff. And then once they get to a good stopping point, they send a link to a repository or a Figma file to a couple of peers and colleagues with the hope that it could be useful to them because you used it on your project and you're like, this helped us. So we send it to somebody else and then crickets. Nothing. You hear nothing back. Right? So your design system, which at that point is likely more a UI kit or a component library, maybe not a fully connected design system yet, just kind of sits there. And then after a couple of weeks of nothing, you go, well, that was a good shot, I guess. And the thing is, that meeting that you had where it's like, oh, what if we came up with this stuff? Probably at the same time, 4 other teams around the company were doing the same exact thing, right? They had the same conversation, similar results. Each of these teams mentally filed away their attempts at a design system. And this is a space that I think a lot of companies have, a lot of organizations have this. And I call this space where the design system attempts are just rotting away. I call it the design system graveyard. The first time I gave this workshop was on Halloween, so it fit a little bit better then. Yeah. So why does it often have to come to this? Well, let's pick apart a few assumptions. We'll talk a little bit about buy-in and how you get people invested in design systems. I think this is the process that everybody wants. And apologies for the small text, I'll read out each of these things. The first one here, this pink diamond, the first step that everybody wants is you propose a design system initiative to leadership for funding, right? And then, in the middle here, let's use my fancy remote. Obviously it's approved, obviously. And so then, once it's approved, you start creating components, and then product teams use those components, and then product teams contribute components back to the design system. Obviously, right? This is silly. This is a happy path. This almost never works. What happens if the funding proposal doesn't go through, doesn't get approved? Which, by the way, I ran a design system consultancy for 10 years. I shut it down last year, and we had worked with hundreds of teams on their design systems in different capacities, and I can only count on one hand the times that I've seen this process work. And most of the times, it was lucky. It was just lucky timing. Let me simplify this even further. I think this is the process that most people want. First you make a design system, then people use the design system, right? Easy as that. So simple, duh. My kids do this all the time. Dad, first you put your stuff out on the lawn for a yard sale, and then you make a ton of money, duh. Okay, yeah, missing a couple steps, but okay. You make a design system, and then people use it, duh. And the problem is, when the plan doesn't work, we don't really have a plan B, because we're like, well, that was supposed to work, so now what do we do? So how do we prevent design system graveyard? There's a variation that I call design system ghost towns. Still alive, but no one's there, Let me share some examples of how to do it. I'm going to share 3 ways in particular. rather than walking into your leadership's office, your design director or your tech director or your VP of product or whatever with your ROI facts. That's what we do, right? We get our keynote decks together and we go, let's talk about ROI, and then you go in and armed with that. Instead of walking in and going, let me tell you why this company needs a design system, do this instead. Volunteer for something. And I want to give you a couple of suggestions for things that you should volunteer for. First up, I generally suggest that you don't use the words design system. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So what do you say then? What do you volunteer for? Because if you go in and you go, well, our team volunteers to make a design system, your leadership will say like, yeah, I would rather you volunteer for something else. And what is that something else? It's usually this kind of stuff. So these are the handful of inflection points that I've found to be really great jumping off points for design systems. And why is this? I touched on it in the last session. These are the points of change that generally an organization already buys into. When a big rebrand, replatforming, any sort of migration, a merger or an acquisition, especially large ones, these are ones where leadership has already agreed to something. They go, okay, a big change is coming, and you have the ability to say, well, while we're under the hood, we might as well. And they go, okay, yeah, sure. Is it going to help us get it done faster? Yeah, yes. Okay, cool, let's do it. These are the best kinds of opportunities for design system efforts because the organization is already committed to this large company-wide change. So what you do is you hitch your buy-in wagon to these quests because they are already on the move. So you volunteer your team to tackle this kind of stuff, and you don't even have to say the words design system. In fact, don't say the words design system. So what do you say instead? You say this. Instead of going, we'll make the design system, instead you say, we'll ship this 3 months ahead of schedule. Now people's ears are pricked up. Well, how are you going to do that? We can tell you if you want, or we can just do it. Yeah, go ahead.
What if you don't ship it 3 months ahead of schedule?
That's the risk, right? Yeah, what if you don't ship it 3 months ahead of schedule? That's the risk. The risk is don't lie. I am not suggesting that you lie. Right? The risk is you have to be able to do it. You have to know that you're able to do it. And I'll share some tips on how you can prove to yourself that you're able to do it before you go to leadership and go, yeah, we can do this. All right? Do not lie. Never. Do not lie. I think it's life advice, I guess. I'm a life coach now. These are really great things to give to an organization. We'll ship this with less bugs. We'll ship this with higher velocity. And if you have confidence that your design system can do that, these are not false claims. So let's talk about how to make them not false claims, how to give yourself the confidence to be able to do that. How are we going to do this? We know through a design systems give those kinds of results. We know that, but we don't have to say that. That's inside baseball. Right? That's like saying, if somebody comes up to you for your engineers, especially your front-end engineers, if somebody comes up to you and go like, how are you going to build this? And you go, oh, well, I'm going to use Flexbox, I'm going to write this line of CSS and this line of CSS. And they're like, no one cares about that level of detail. And working on a design system is sort of that level of detail. It's something that the people working on it need to know. That's important. But higher up than that, not a lot of people need to know about that. So let's say you have at least some interest, if not buy-in, on how to help with the replatforming or the rebrand. They go, okay, yeah, your team wants to tackle the rebrand? Yeah, great, we would love for a team to do that. So what's next? This is probably the next biggest pitfall that I see teams fall into. What do teams usually do here? Hey, we tackled, they said we could work on the rebrand. What should we do? Make components. No, don't make components, right? That's a terrible idea, don't make components. Why is this so bad? Because you just promised your head of product or your CTO or your VP of design or whatever that you would help with something on the roadmap. So that's what you've got to do, help them with the roadmap. Right? Because those are all roadmap items. So let me go back a couple slides to just share that. All of these things here are roadmap items. Design system is almost never on the roadmap. So when you ask or volunteer to do that, your leadership sees you doing something distracting. Why are you doing that? We haven't put that on our, we didn't put design system on our H2 planning. It's never on H2 planning. Design system is never there. It's always priority number 2 or 3. There's usually something else ahead of it. So you use these as the Trojan horse to build your design system. Right? So that's the technique to doing this. The best way to grow your design system is to continue to focus on creating customer value. All of the roadmap things, you tie your design system to those things, and that's what we're going to talk about in this session. Most good organizations structure their backlog to maximize and accelerate customer value. So when you pick off roadmap items like a rebrand or like working on this product or that feature or something like that, you help improve your product, which helps your design system too. How do we do this? What are the steps? These are what I call design system pilots. It's kind of like the pilot of a TV show. How many people here have seen a pilot of a TV show before? Some of them are terrible, right? Anybody ever see the Family Guy pilot? It's one of the worst pilots, one of the worst things I've ever seen. But what they're doing is they're trying to figure stuff out. They're trying to figure out some characters and some situations and some scenarios and things like that to see if they work, to see if it's worth doing more. They don't have to be perfect. And so that's how I like to think about design systems. And you pick up these pilots to go like, should we do more things like this? If we want to rebrand the whole company, can we rebrand this little part of the product and see if that works, and then scale that if it does work? All right, so that's what the pilot is designed to do. It's a standalone piece designed to be a proof of concept. And the question to answer with pilots is, what kinds of things do we want to be able to make with our design system? If we want to be able to make dashboards with our design system, why don't we work on a small dashboard? If we want to be able to make intranets with our design system, why don't we work on a small intranet? If we want to be able to make flagship.com e-commerce sites, why don't we work on a small piece of a flagship.com e-commerce site? Right? And if we can do that, then we can build the confidence that we can do this in a larger way. Create a thing, then scale a thing. One of the pitfalls that I see with design systems is people try to combine those two steps. We're going to create it at scale right now. We're going to create a button that all 600 teams can use. Really? How are you going to do that? Well, I don't know. It's going to be a good button. That's usually the answer. It's going to be technically sound. That's not enough to get 600 teams to use it. Technically sound is not enough. So what do you do first is you get one team to use it, and then 2 teams, and then 3 teams. And then you can scale it from there. So I'll share an example. A couple years ago, I worked with ExxonMobil to help them with their first design system. And at the time, they were all over the map in terms of their design language and the way that they built their front-end experiences. So at ExxonMobil, they had so many different developers there. They actually had, at the time when we started working with them, they had 500 developers there and 1 designer. Wow. That's the worst ratio that I've ever heard. 1 designer, his name's Chris O'Brien. He was a very, very patient man. And so because there were 500 developers there, some of them didn't have a designer, some of them have design experience and some of them don't. So there was stuff all over the map because they were just pulling at whatever they could. I'll build something on my own from scratch. I'll use a library over here. I'll use this thing over here. So they had, this is like one of their apps that they had. I don't even know what this does. And then this is like another one. So it's like not exactly the same. No, this was another one. Look at this one. What is this? Here's another one. And so what we help them do is move towards something more like this, or like this, and like this, and like this, this. Right? This is what we eventually ended up with. So I'm going to walk you through how we got to this place from the previous place. Hopefully you can start to see some themes emerging in terms of typography and brand colors, and even some imagery, and the same thing under the hood on the front end side. All the code was consistent. What I'd like to call out is what we didn't do, is what a lot of teams do, is, let's start building components. Let's build, let's do color palettes and cards and headers and footers. What we did was we let that stuff be emergent. I'll share what that means in just a minute. We let it be the output instead of the starting point. So that allows product, and more accurately customer need, to drive the tools as opposed to the other way around. And I'm a firm believer that that's a much better way to build a design system. You let the products be the test cases, the speculative models, the pilots for what needs to go in your design system. So let's take a look at one in particular. This is one of the pilots. This is their agenda creator product. They have lots of meetings at ExxonMobil, and every meeting has to have an agenda, which I'm a big believer in. So this was out of the box SharePoint. They use SharePoint for a bunch of things. This was like the thing that they had out of the box. So we were creating a custom app specifically for this. So what did we do first? We didn't build headers and footers and cards and links and tables and stuff like that. What do we do? Customer research. Just like any good product needs. So we talk to customers, people who use this all the time. We talk to stakeholders, the people who would own this product. Right? We understood what needed to be there and what didn't need to be there. And then we designed and built this. None of these were components. None of these are abstract. None of these are reusable. None of these things are any of those things. We just built a one-page product. Then when we were done with it, then we looked at it and we went, what of these things can other people reuse? Because design system components should be extracted from real products. Not created and then input into them, but actually create the product first and then pull stuff out of it to create a design system. So we looked at it and we were like, I mean, this header, like, this is not the perfect header. It doesn't even have navigation in it, right? But this one-page app needed this header. Are there other one-page apps that could use this header? We did a little bit of digging around. We said, yeah, we actually think that it does. We hypothesized that was true. The nice thing is that the next team that needs a header without navigation, they get all the benefit of the good thinking that went into making this one in the first place. It's responsive. It has all the right typefaces and brand attributes. It's tested for accessibility. Its behavior has been QA'd. It is pulled straight out of a product and ready to use where applicable. So what we did was, we built it for this product. Then we did another pass at it to abstract it so that other people could use it in their products. 2 passes. I think a lot of people want to build design system components like, we want to build it the first time, the right way, and never touch it again. I'm like, why? It seems longer and slower and dumber. I think that as an industry, we have an allergy to refactoring, when instead we should just build that into our process. So we built it once fast. We didn't worry about is it reusable. That wasn't a concern the first time. And the second time, we spent a couple of extra hours to make it more reusable. We did a refactor. That was version 0.2 of this header. And it only took a couple of hours because we're separating the concerns. Create it first and then figure out how it scales afterwards. So again, notice what we did. What we didn't do is we didn't start abstractly. We didn't say, let's make a header that everyone can use. Because if we did that, you all know what would happen. We would over-design and over-engineer the header. We would put everything in the header that was ever possible in a header. Global nav, mega drop-downs, simple drop-downs, global avatar, people search, regular search, utility net, like all that stuff would have gone in, and then we would have created this monster of a component that eventually just becomes Bootstrap, right? That then people use it and they go, okay, let me strip out 90% of this because I'm not actually using that. So we didn't design one header that everyone could use. We designed one header for this product, and then we said, well, let's design it now, let's abstract it now for the next 2 products to use. We're not going for scale for the entire organization at first. Right? So now we have this header, a few other people can use it. We got in touch with the people who we thought could use it, and we said, here's the thing that you can use, and we actually set it up in a way that you could use it. And in our storybook, we actually built out some of their pages to show them how we would use it if we were them. It didn't take that long, it took just an extra couple of days. It's just a header for a one-page app. It's a very simple component. We didn't do this for the flagship header for the .com, because that would have taken a couple of weeks or a couple of months. We did it on a very small piece of this. Then we moved on to the next product. This is their identity and access management portal. And we realized, hey, we could use the header that we made on the Agenda Creator product on this product with a couple of tweaks though. We do need a couple of more pieces. Like we did need navigation, so this is what we built for that product. And we added a couple of things. We added search, we added navigation, because we needed those parts. All right, so this is a variation on that header. So now we have 2 headers in our design system. I think this is the other big thing that I see teams do is they want to build one header to rule them all. I have never worked on a design system that had one header. Most have had 8 to 12. And they're all variations on a theme. None of them are like completely separate from one another. They all kind of overlap a bit. But we added some of those pieces. So eventually, after we worked on about 6 or 7 different products, we had a few variations of our header in our design system with things like drop-downs and utility links and things like that. And also a bunch of variations that didn't have those things. So it wasn't one big header that was completely configurable that people had to figure out how to include this thing or not include this other thing. It was like, here, you need this version? Use this version. We have it in there. So we had 8 different versions of the header in this design system. And each of these was easy to create because it wasn't an abstract exercise, it was a concrete exercise. It had to serve the needs of this product. We built this header for Endeavor. We built that other header for the Agenda Creator product. We built that other header for the Identity Access Management portal. And then we figured out how it abstracts. And now that we have a robust header, more specifically, a couple of variations of robust headers, we should never have to design a header from scratch again. We might make another variant if we need it, but the more variants you get, actually the less you need eventually over time. So there is some law of diminishing returns there, and you get to this critical mass point where you go, I think these 6 serve us pretty well. You know, maybe a year from now you go, okay, we need to add a 7th. It's fine. But it's okay to have that level of variation. We'll likely tweak them, add to them, edit them, make variations to them. And also some teams will probably just like create their own variations of it that don't need to go back into the system. because they need a very custom piece of it, or a custom modification of it, and that's okay for them to have. But if we save them a week of work by starting with ours, that's great. That's the reason that people look at material design and Bootstrap and all those design systems in the first place. So if they can have all the good stuff that comes with those, plus our brand typefaces, our colors, our color palette, accessibility, all of those kinds of things, it's a better starting point than some of those other pieces, some of those other products, excuse me. Then, you gotta put some of that knowledge somewhere. So we created a reference site. And we actually created a reference site from the pieces in the design system. Once we had enough to create the reference site, we had side navs, we had thumbnails, we had media cards, we had headers. So we created a design system with the design system. We created a reference site with the design system. The reference site was one of our pilots. And it had customers, it has use cases. So we treated it like a product using the design system as a tool. So again, like I said before, we call this a reference site. This is the reference site for Unity, which is the name of the design system that we came up with for ExxonMobil. Here's our page of headers and footers that we got from extracting from real products and the product design process. And if we click into this, one of the header links here, look at how many variations of header we have. There they are. Default header, blue header, header with search, header with more links, condensed header, header with profile info, header with badge, header with kicker, header with global nav, all options. Those are the variations that we needed from the user research that we did, treating our design system as a product for people who need to use it. Oh yeah?
Yeah, so are each of those variations separately built components? Are they, do they share anything between them? Like how is it built, basically?
I would say 60 to 70% of it was shared among all the components. And then the other 30-40% is like, well, this one just needs a search box and the other ones don't have it. And we followed sort of an atomic design methodology on all of it, so that each of those things are like, oh, we need to add this molecule or organism here, we need to remove this molecule or organism here. Yeah.
How did you determine which one should be different variants versus different properties?
Oh, can you say more about that?
So each of these are different actual components, right? Like these 8 are different components, right?
Yep.
So how did you determine it should be a different component versus it needs to be a different property under, say, 1 to 5?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna punt on the answer here, but I'll tell you why. I'll punt it. So we built this in 2014, something like that. At the time, I don't think Storybook or things like that even supported props. So we didn't have to make that choice. It was like all of these are completely different variants. It wasn't like we just didn't have the option to say like, oh, this one nav equals true, whereas the other one nav equals false. We didn't have that option. So it actually made it simpler for us to do that. So even now that we do have that option, sometimes I'll just do user interviews with teams to go, do you want it as props? Because some teams are like, yes, we do everything with props. Great, we will build it with props. Some teams are like, what's a prop? Cool, we will not build it with props. Got it. But that's a product design problem, right? It's about treating your design system as a product and talking to the customers of this product and go, what do you know how to use? You know props? Oh yeah, we do everything with props. We should probably build our thing with props then. Because our customers know how to use that. Potentially, there's a version where we say, okay, they don't use props, but we have the opportunity to educate them on how to use props. But I find that to be a slippery slope because that's then the design system team going, well, we know better how to do your job. And I don't like to go down that path. I like to trust the product teams to go, let them do their jobs the way that they want to do their jobs. We should just help them do their jobs better. Not better, easier, excuse me. We should help them do their jobs easier. So if they don't want to use props, then we shouldn't build it with props. Even if we think that props are objectively the better solution. Most design systems that I've seen fail are never because it wasn't objectively the better solution. It was because we don't know props, so we're not going to use it. I don't like blue headers, we're not going to use it. What? Those are terrible reasons, but those are reasons that I see all the time where people don't use design systems. I don't like design systems that start with the letter M. What? Okay, sure. Let's name it something that's not the letter M. Right? That's product design. That's talking to our customers, being in regular contact with their customers and going, how would you use this? How would you want to use this? And then building something really quick and go, how about this? Would you use this? No, I think earlier somebody said in the last session, somebody said like how do you do this without constantly usability testing, with teams, or I have teams that just won't be a guinea pig for this kind of stuff. If you have teams that won't be a guinea pig for this stuff, it's kind of shot. You have to have teams that are willing to be guinea pigs for it. There are things that we can do to make them want to be guinea pigs for it, want to be part of the initial set of people who want to use our design system. We can affect that, we can influence that, but if you have no one that's willing to try it out, that's a problem for design systems. That's like having a product where no customers is willing to try it. That's like building Gmail, and people are like, email's overrated. Okay, I guess, you know? So a lot of people say like, yeah, design system's a product, design system's a product. That's what it means for a design system to be a product, is for you to be constantly usability testing, constantly interviewing, constantly doing user research, constantly, so to the point of, do we build this with props or not? That's not a technical question, that's a user question. So if we're not talking to our users, we can't answer that question. The only way that we can answer it is, well, I'm a better developer than they are, and I think that we should build it with props. That's a really slippery slope to go down. So I don't suggest it. Yeah?
Is that, how important is it for designers and developers to share the same sort of language?
Like, utmost, the most important. In the last session, I said that design systems are connected, and at the base level, that's like technically connected, right? So ideally, your Figma library is connected to your React code. That's hard to do, but I think even more important, your designers and your engineers have to be moving closer to each other. And we'll talk about that in the next section after lunch in more detail. But if they're not using the same language, you don't know that you're doing the same thing, and then you're not collaborating. And I think collaboration is what makes design systems work. So if designers are like, oh, we call it variables, and the engineers are like, we call it properties, there's a chance for a breakage somewhere. Because somewhere somebody's going to go, but I thought we called it props, and they're not going to know that. So I think it is very important for designers and engineers to have the same language between the two. I think that takes training, and I think that is a culture problem more than it's not a technical challenge. That's a culture challenge. So the question I think there is, how do you build a culture where designers are comfortable to speak in Git flow? Where engineers are comfortable talking about Figma props, and how that's different. An example that comes up often there is, I meet some designers who are like, oh yeah, the way that Figma works is Flexbox. Anybody heard that? Yeah, Figma uses Flexbox. And then you talk to an engineer, a front-end engineer, and they're like, I mean, kinda. Figma is not Flexbox. It's just close enough that if you don't know Flexbox, you're like, yeah, I think that's how it works. And it sort of works that way. It doesn't exactly work that way. And that's where I've seen QA build, design QA break. Is designers go, well, I built it with Flexbox. And engineers are like, I mean, sure you did, that's cute. But they have to do a lot of translation. And I think a lot of the onus, and we'll talk about this definitely in the next section, the onus often falls to engineers because they're at the last part of a waterfall process. So it's now, you have the least amount of time on a project or on a sprint, and now you have to do some translation. And some engineers are like, that's just part of the job, which I think is kind and sad, but realistic. And I think there are some cultures who go like, that shouldn't be part of our job. We need to change that somehow. We need to get designers closer to the code, or we need to get engineers closer to the design process. But to me, I think if there are cultures who move designers and engineers closer together, and some that move them farther apart. I think the farther apart you are, the more difficult it becomes to actually maintain a design system. Try not to soapbox about this. Thank you for that question.
I have one more question on
sure.
props and variants. I'm curious, I understand that props weren't as much of a thing when you started building these, but I still see the possibility with props of just having one component to rule them all and millions of props. So how do you strike that balance of working with users to figure out, actually here's where we really should just lean into a new variant versus more props here?
I'll tell you what I've learned in aggregate about design systems, even though the swing is wide on that. So in aggregate, what I've learned about design systems is the holy grail is composability for components. The holy grail is we have a box, and anybody can fill that box with anything based on a series of prompts. Like, that's the dream. The dream is like, we can put anything anywhere and it works, and I've never seen composability work in any organization, outside of a very small scale. So I think that especially engineers who write modular code, this is like how the engineers work. Like, this is what makes work much easier, is to create composable things. And you can do that in your own system. Getting somebody else to use your system is like significantly more difficult. So I've never seen composability work. And so because of that, I generally don't encourage teams to go down that path too much. Sometimes it scratches an itch, so it's like, I'm a big believer that teams should be working on things that are important to them, but sometimes they're working on things that are important to them at the expense of people using the design system, and I don't think that's a trade-off worth making. So because of that, that's kind of the foundation. Because of that, when I see teams lean too heavily on the props route, I'm like, I think they're going for box composability. I think that's what they're shooting for. So I try to nip that in the bud with user research. I try to go like, okay, let's talk to 4 teams right now and see how well they can do. Let's host a workshop and let's see how well they can compose things. And if they can compose things well, great, let's go down that route. But let's get a little bit of data before we fully commit to that path. And I would say 7 times out of 10, the data says like our engineering teams aren't ready for that. Like we don't have the architecture, we don't have the culture, we don't have any of that stuff. Same thing is true for designers. Like, as Figma gets more and more mature, I see a lot of composability things happening in Figma files. Everything's a slot component, everything can be replaced with anything else. And then there's some designers, especially, like, who suffers from this? It's usually the newer and the more junior designers. Because they log into a Figma file and they open a Figma file and they're like, I have no idea how this is built, I'm just gonna detach it. And it's like, well, that's what we're trying to avoid in the first place, is people detaching things, because it's no longer a system anymore. So for that, same thing, I try to get some data based on who's going to be using the design system before going fully down that route. Now, I've worked with 1 or 2 teams that are like super duper mature. They have a culture of like everybody learns to do things a particular way, and so composability works for them in that. And if that's the case, in that culture, a very prop-based design system is really good. It actually is faster than ones that are not that way. But if people don't know how to use it, then it becomes a bigger problem. So I think that's the trade-off there, is figuring out, like, with the teams who are supposed to be using this, can they do it successfully? I think a lot of people try to build objectively good design systems, and I try to encourage them to build subjectively good design systems. I think back to the title of this workshop, design systems people use. I've seen a lot of really good, intelligent, well-architected, beautifully architected, like works of art design system graveyards. Like, just no one uses them. They're too smart. And they make people feel dumb for not knowing how to use them. People don't like feeling dumb. It's back to the, like, it's like a silly reason. I don't like using design systems to start with the letter M. But it's like, okay, yeah. If everybody at the organization says, like, we just don't like the letter M here. I've worked with organizations like that. We can't name it that because 3 years ago we had a thing like that was letter staff. It can't be that. Instead, it's, can we have the discipline to have a really tight, good design system? 6 components. Just a hard idea to get your head around if you're not used to that. All right, we'll come back to that. I'm way off track. Any questions about that? We'll come back to it later. All right. Reference sites, components, blah, 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 design systems, hashtag design systems. Okay, here's the point. After doing enough pilots, you get a robust reference site. So this is not the first thing that we release. This is the 20th thing that we release. After we do 20, you extract things out of products. Oh, actually, that's my next slide. Design system components should be extracted from real products. So what's the process? Build a product, extract some components. Build the next product with the stuff that you extracted. Extract that new component to come out of that. That's the cycle. Oh, do I have that slide? I don't have that slide. I'll put it up later. So what is a design system pilot? It is a product that you make specifically chosen to feed your design system. So that means it's important that you choose the right products to pilot and in the right order. You pick a product, okay, we're gonna build a dashboard. Why are we doing a dashboard now instead of the intranet? Because if we build a dashboard, we'll get header, we'll get card, and we'll get footer. And we can use those 3 in intranet. So ideally, the first pilot that you do makes the second one a little bit easier, which makes the third one a little bit easier, which makes the fourth one a little bit easier, and that's the cycle that goes on. I have a slide it's called the measuring spoon cycle. I'll put it up in a little bit. I'll find it. I'm writing a book on design systems right now called Design Systems Are a Practice, and that's the practice. The practice is that you just do that forever, for the rest of your the rest of the life of the organization. Build a product, extract some things from it. Build a new thing with the things that you've extracted. Extract some new things from that. Build the next product, and the next product, and the next product, and the next product, and you get better and better at that. You just do it all the time, over and over again. And it's a counterintuitive way to think about design systems, right? How many people that's like a backwards way to think of it? You're like, I thought about it completely backwards. Nobody, okay, you're all geniuses, that's fine. Like that, it's just not what we're trained to think about design systems. We're trained to think like, you build a bunch of components and then people use them. Because that's what it looks like from the outside. You look at Shopify's Polaris.
Our ability to still ship things reasonably, but now or in the future, it's something that we just care about. So it's like you're moving towards that, and everybody's moving towards that at different speeds, but it's like if your organization doesn't do that, there's a lot of people who are like, well, job doesn't make me learn it, so I won't. So they don't ever get that technical exposure. They don't attend a workshop. They don't educate themselves on that subject because they don't have time or mental space for it, or whatever you want.
Agreed. I think that's a sad state of things, and I agree that that's a realistic state of things, unfortunately. Yeah. Love that. Awesome. Yeah.
First, I would definitely +1 on that, and also related to the kind of the conversation around like how do you prioritize accessibility, doing it all from the get-go. I think another consideration is also that there are different levels of compliance with accessibility. So, for I work in a lot of government contracts, so usually that involves Section 508 compliance and kind of level like AA for the web content accessibility. And one like piece of that is as you move along in the project, you might initially just be at level 8, just the lowest level of it meets those guidelines. And then aspirationally, you're like, okay, well, we're gonna keep iterating, eventually getting to that.
I love that. That's awesome. I think it was a comment up here. Do you have a comment? No?
I had a small one, also plus like 1,000 on UX research and having like actual usability studies, not just for the accessibility part, but just seeing somebody use your application in a way that you, in a million years, would never have thought would be used is eye-opening. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
I'm just following up on that. For all my dev team, I force them to use the tools. Don't just sit there and satisfy the requirement, because that's easy. It's a self-test for most of the level AA stuff and everything. Like actually go and see what it's like to navigate an entire website with your eyes closed and using the tabs and all that. You learn a lot about, it's not just about meeting the criteria, although it's important, but actually making it good. You got a lot of choices within that. But that's not what this is about. It's what it's been bringing up.
Great suggestion, yeah. Awesome. All right, y'all. One last slide. Here's the takeaway from this section. Not a great idea to start with a design system, or worse, a component library in order to output a product. Instead, start with products to output a design system. Right? It's the other way around. Make a product, take things out of it. Sorry, I lied. Last on you. This is a guy. He wrote an article. It's called Emergent Strategy, and he says strategies that appear without clear intentions or in spite of them are called emergent strategies. Actions simply converge into patterns. They may become deliberate, of course, if the pattern is recognized and legitimated by senior management, but that's after the fact. Purely deliberate strategy precludes learning once the strategy is formulated. Emergent strategy fosters it. People take actions one by one and respond to them so that patterns eventually form. To me, design systems are an exercise in emergent strategy. I think we want them as an industry to be a deliberate strategy. We want to plan it, we want to put it down on paper and say we're going to do this, and then execute it perfectly. And that's what turns into design system graveyards. If we allow them to be emergent though, we go, let's build products for our customers. Let's create value for our customers, and then we'll pull some stuff out with what we learn. Hey, people use this thing all the time. Great, let's make that official. Okay, people like this thing. Great, let's make that official. That's the approach that I've seen work best with design systems. I shared this slide earlier, why this doesn't work, this process. And this is a better process to me, is choose a good design system pilot, make the product, extract valuable components into your design system. So instead of make system, use system, essentially it is this: make product, get system. In the other version, it's harder. And I can break down later on if you want. This is easier, and this is why it's easier, because the first two steps here are just good old product design. Your company's probably already good at product design. Keep doing that good stuff. Do that thing. This is helpful because this is a built-in contribution model. If you take something that's already working really well and you extract it and you put it into your design system, hello, contribution. That's contribution right there. We'll talk later about who does this and how. Last story that I'll share is, I love to cook, but I hate cleaning up. Like, to the point where if I have to clean up, I'm just not gonna cook. It's takeout night. Luckily, my wife doesn't mind cleaning. She hates cooking though. She's like, I will not cook. So if it's on her to cook, we're having takeout. We have a lot of takeout at our house. So we have a partnership. I cook, she cleans. I get to do the stuff that I really like without doing the stuff that I don't like. She gets to do stuff that she doesn't mind doing without doing the stuff that she hates doing. Right? That's how we should model it with our design system and product teams. One cooks, one cleans. Don't make your product team do contribution to a system. They don't know how to do that. Let them make product stuff. You all don't do product stuff. Don't invent new things in the design system. That happens on the product side. One cooks, one cleans. The other doesn't have to do the other thing. Right? So if there are people who are systems people that are like, I don't want to work on the product stuff. Great, do the system stuff. And there are people who are like, I don't want to do the system stuff. I don't want to have to worry about how something is reusable or scalable. I just want to design cool things over here. Awesome, work on a feature, work on a product. This is how product teams and design systems can kind of coexist. One cooks, one cleans. That is a connected system. Right? That is something where the two of them can help each other in that. Last thing then, before we break, I shared this list before, right? And I think when people see a list like this, they think, oh, these are the things we have to make for a design system, right? And this is not the list of things we have to make. This is actually the things that you get as a byproduct of what you're already doing. Do product design. Like, do the stuff that helps your customers, that keeps your company in business, that helps your customers be satisfied or happy or whatever it is that you do for them. And then you get this stuff. You get it for free by doing that stuff really well. All right, that's the last thing. We'll do a lunch break. We're a little bit late on that. So instead of 12:30 to 1:30, let's do 1 to 2. I'm gonna run out. I think there's like a Chick-fil-A nearby. I'm gonna run out and get something like that. And I'm gonna come back here as soon as I can. I'm gonna eat lunch here. If anybody wants to talk about system stuff, we can do that over lunch. If you just wanna have a non-design system lunch, please do so. And then we'll come back at 2 p.m. here. And please take your stuff. I don't know if this room is gonna be locked. So take your stuff with you if you have any valuables. Leave stuff at your own risk. Thanks, everybody.
Malik.
No, where's that from?
Oh, it's originally Arabic, but I'm from Senegal, so like the pronunciation. But yeah, it's Senegal. Yeah, they're right in neighboring countries. I have a cousin who's like a Mali Senegal convert. Yeah, I mean, yeah, bro. I know when you're on the agency, like you're always in your class, right? So I'm always in, I always get drop comments and stuff.